And now we're lot number 2, which is Parshat Emor, the um, the Parsha of the week. And these two actually have a lot of overlap because Emor always falls in the time period of the year where you're doing the counting of the Omer. But what we're going to look at in Parshat Emor is something which is called the Parshat HaMoadot. We read this on all of our major holidays, and well, I should say all the pilgrimage holidays. You read it the first day of Pesach, I think, and the first day of Sukkot, and it is the section of the Torah which I might as well bring it up for you. Uh, okay, so it starts. Well, I'll bring it up in English, but let me bring it up in Hebrew first. So it says, um, you may notice from the Kiddush of Yom Tov Day, Eilmosh de Hashem Mikrei Kodesh Asher Tikru'u Otam B'Ma'otam, or sometimes people use Vayedaber Moshe et Moah de Hashem El Bnei Yisrael. That's another one that is in this parsha as well. And you will notice though a couple of things, and we're going to deal with this quite deeply. The first, um, the first 3 or 4, these are all dealing with Shabbat, right? Then the next several deal with Pesach. Sorry, I don't write so well with the mouse. Okay, so these are going to become the building blocks of our holidays. After Pesach, you're going to have the counting of the Omer. So let me just show you the next section. We're going to look at this in detail. This is, I think, in my humble opinion, important to know, right? So this is Omer, and this is all what we will come to understand as the holiday of Shavuot. It's all first fruits kinds of stuff, right? And then the Parsha will, of course, continue, and it's going to get into, it's going to go to Rosh Hashanah, although it's not going to call Rosh Hashanah Rosh Hashanah. It's going to call Rosh Hashanah by a different name. It is called Zichron Trua, a remembrance of Trua, a remembrance of these blasts. Also, I should point out that again, I think I say this every week, but you can never hear this, in my opinion, too much. The months in true biblical fashion are the 7th month, B'chodesh HaShvi'i, on the 1st of the month. That's the reason it's the 7th month. It's the 7th month from the Exodus. First month is going to be Nisan. Second month is Iyar. Third one is Sivan. 7th is the month in which Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are going to be fine. And just in case you were wondering, there is Yom Kippur, and then as we go down, we'll get to Sukkot. But you're getting a general idea of what's in this specific part of the parsha. Okay. Now the Sifri tells us B'shloshim Mekamot Maskir Parshat Modo. There are 3 different places where the Torah has a full survey of the holidays. One is Torah Kohanim. The Torah of the Kohanim is Vayikra, right? It's the instruction book for Kohanim. Mipnei Sidran, because that gives us, in a way, that gives us their calendar. Chumash HaPekudim is the book of lists. That's Bamidbar, right? And there it's because of Karbanot. And that's where all of the maftirs come from. And it tells us what are the Musaf offerings for each one of those parts of the holiday. And then there's the Mishnah Torah, Mipnei HaIbor. And that one is because of the intercalation. And there we learn that Passover has to be in the spring. Now, this may seem to you as a super obvious point. Passover needs to be in the spring, because who has ever heard of Passover in the winter? But this is the anchor. This is what anchors us to a solar calendar in addition to the lunar calendar, and it's the reason that Pesach does not function like Ramadan, right? Because Ramadan goes throughout the calendar, it migrates because the Arab calendar is also a lunar calendar, but they don't have an anchor to the sun, so it can float throughout the year. But the Hebrew months, they have to keep Pesach in the spring. But what does this tell us? It tells us that there's something special about um, um, our particular parsha, which helps us understand the calendar. Now, here's what I tried to do. I tried to sort of map out what is it that each one of these aspects of the holiday what are the features that are described in this. So one thing I want to just point out to you is that there is one term which gets used throughout. And I think it's an important thing. Just this may just be an extraneous piece of information, but I find it very helpful to me. So you have Shabbat here, which is called a Mikra Kodesh. Mikra Kodesh is sometimes it means a holy gathering, a holy convocation. It means calling everybody together for a holy event. So Pesach, interestingly, is not called a Mikra Kodesh, but the holiday of Matzot is. The Omer counting is not, and neither are the two loaves, but Rosh Hashanah is, Yom Kippur is, Sukkot is. So just this gives us the full set of days which are going to be considered Mikra Kodesh. What I did not put on here, counting of 7 weeks is a Mikra Kodesh because this really is Shavuot. It doesn't call it that per se, but that's what this holiday is. So we have the 7 days, the 6 days, which are going to be called Mikra Kodesh. No, it should, the 6 days which are going to be Mikra Kodesh. Actually, it's a little bit more than that because Chag HaMatzot is going to have 2, and Sukkot is going to have, or Sukkot and Shmini Atzeret are going to be 2. So you get a few more days. But this idea of Mikra Kodesh is very important because Mikra Kodesh is the definition for a day where work is generally permitted. Now, as we're going to see in a minute, there are 2 different ways in which we're going to say work is not permitted. But those are called a Mikra Kodesh. What holidays are not Mikra Kodesh? This is the audience participation point of this. What holidays, obviously not listed here, that appear on every Jewish calendar every year, are not going to be a Mikra Kodesh?
Purim.
Very good. Purim. Who said that?
I did. Sue.
Sue. Okay, Sue, I knew it. I knew I could count on you. Okay. The Purim is not going to be a Mikra Kodesh because are you allowed to drive on Purim?
Yes.
Yes. All these days, all Mikra Kodesh's days, you can't drive. Right?
So then Hanukkah's not either, right?
Hanukkah.
Yes, correct. Hanukkah is another one which is not. And Rosh Chodesh is also not. Right? So the new month. All of those things are not going to be Mikra Kodesh. These are the set of Mikra Kodesh. And Mikra Kodesh is generally, the sine qua non of it is, I can't do work. Now, there are 2 different kinds of ways where you cannot do work. Right? And here, let me just change my color a little bit. Okay. There are 2 kinds of holidays where you were going to say all malacha, all work cannot be done. That is Shabbat and Yom Kippur. Those are the only days where all work cannot be done. Every other version of this, of the Mikra Kodesh, is going to be servile work, what is called here Melechet Avodah. So, okay. Okay. Melechet Avodah. So these are the days which are Melechet Avodah. Chag HaMatzot, you cannot do Melechet Avodah. Shavuot, you cannot do Melechet Avodah. Rosh Hashanah, you cannot do Melechet Avodah. Again, Zichron Truah, the key here to remembering it is Truah is the sound of Rosh Hashanah. So that's Rosh Hashanah. So Rosh Hashanah is Melechet Avodah. And, and Sukkot is also Melechet Avodah. Functionally, the difference between all malacha and melechat avodah, all malacha includes carrying, it includes cooking. But mikra code, but melechat avodah, servile work, means you are allowed to do work for yourselves of a sort. You're allowed to cook for yourself. You are allowed to carry for the purpose of cooking. You're allowed to carry for the purpose of the joy of Yom Tov. What melechat avodah means is we generally we don't do all work. We can't grind wheat. We can't build a house. We can't pave the driveway. We can't light a fire, or we can't kindle a fire. But what can we do? We are allowed to cook. We're allowed to carry. Those things we are allowed to do. So it might be a relatively small difference in terms of the functional difference between those two, but Yom Tov has a very different feel because of that. One of the reasons for this is Shabbat is a day where you testify to the God creating the world, and so any kind of work is forbidden. But Yom Tov borrows the protections of Shabbat, but it does not serve as such a testimony. The Yom Tovim are a testimony to the hand of God through history, not the hand of God in creation. And so you don't need the full prohibition of melacha. Yes, Annie.
Well, when we say melacha, is the lametet melacha the
Yes, the 39 acts of labor. The 39, right. The 39 activities that were prohibited when constructing the mikdash. Okay.
So therefore, which ones of the ones you described are not part of that, and they are allowed? Cooking.
Okay. Two definitions. One is food preparation, and rabbinically speaking, that is from the process of kneading forwards. So kneading and baking are the only two things that are permitted. Kneading, baking, cooking and baking are sort of the same general category. Those are the ones that are permitted. The other one, which is permitted, are things that are good for the whole. They're a joy for everyone. They're universally accepted pleasure would probably be a good translation. And so carrying is also allowed, because that carrying and transporting of food, transporting of water was allowed for the purposes of eating. And since it's allowed for eating, it's allowed for everything else. So I guess in a functional basis, you're talking about kneading, cooking/baking, and carrying. Those are the things which are permitted. What we don't permit, we don't let people chop up vegetables. To the extent that you're a person who slaughters a cow, you're allowed to slaughter a cow. But we don't let people grind up their vegetables too much. I'm trying to think of some of the other things that are major separation activities we try not to do. So that's part of the difference. But this sort of lays out, is it just at least a bit of a schematic for this? Okay, let me erase my drawings. Okay. Okay, moving forward. Now, in the middle of so what I had given you in this is all the holidays, but this is not all the mitzvot that appear in Parshat Emor. Part of what appears is these two mitzvot with respect to fields. So one is that you leave the corner of the field for the poor, and the other is that the gleanings have to be left, the stalks that fall down, they're left to the poor and the stranger. And they appear in the middle of the narrative. We're going to look at that in a little bit more carefully. What is also sort of interesting to notice is what's missing in this, right? The Musaf sacrifices, which are very prominent in some of the other descriptions of these holidays, they don't appear here. Nobody tells you, oh, this is Shabbos, this is the kind of Musaf offering you bring. Nobody tells you, no, this is Sukkot, this is the kind of Musaf you have on Sukkot. It doesn't appear at all. It seems to be completely missing. What is included is the Omer, the 2 loaves of Shavuot, fasting on Yom Kippur, Lulav, Sukkah. These are all included. So we're going to take a little bit more of a look. You can divide this narrative in half. It's about 44 verses all told. First 22 end with this verse over here. This is the verse about when you reap your harvest, right? Do not finish to the corner. Let the corner stand for the poor, right? Leave them to the poor and the stranger. I am the Lord your God. I am the Lord your God is a coda. It's a close to that section. So we close that section with that. The final verse of the last section is Laman yedu dorochem kibesukot toshavti b'nei Israel. So the generations know that you dwelt in Sukkot. And again, this coda, Ani Hashem Elokechem, I am the Lord your God. And so we have these two halves. And so, borrowing from the work of Rabbi Elchanan Samet, who saw something very interesting about this way in which this particular chapter was structured. And here's the setup, okay? And I'm going to try and put some English on this as we work together, okay? So we start with Shabbat. I'm going to abbreviate Shabbat. Then we have, actually one of the things which is in here is Pesach. I promised I would do English. Okay, so you actually have Passover. Now, what's interesting is this Passover itself is not a Mikra Kodesh because you're allowed to do work on that day. But then we get Chag HaMatzot, right? And I'm going to call this Matzot because Passover is on the 14th of Nisan, and Chag HaMatzot starts on the 15th. Okay, so you have Chag HaMatzot. I'm going to put 1. That's the first day, and then ditto Chag HaMatzot, 7th day, right? So you get these, and I'll put lines in between all of these. Shabbat, Passover, and then 2 Chag HaMatzot. Okay? Then after that we get Shavuot. We count 7 weeks, right? And then after that we're going to have that we're going to have those verses about the gleanings of the field, that which has to go to the poor. Then we're going to get, this is Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and then everything below the line is Sukkot. Okay? Okay, so that phrase that we just saw a screen ago, right? I know it's hard to do that with my overlays, but this phrase about the poor, that comes right there in the middle. Hold on 1 second. I need to get the door. I'm operating too many stations here at the shul.
So while the rabbi's not here, let's just take 1 second. And if you haven't bought your tickets to Mosaic, please call the shul and buy your tickets or make a donation, or you can do it online on the shul website.
I love it, Sue. I love it. Okay, that's right. Okay, now, all right. So where were we? We set up these 2 parallel structures, right? You have Shabbos, Passover, Shavuot, then you have Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot. Now, one of the things you need to know about this, going back to my my little color scheme here. Okay, so we got 2 halves. This half is spring, right? This is the beginning of the agricultural season, right? This is the spring section. This whole section, spring. This other section is fall, right? There's only 2 holiday seasons. There's spring and there's fall. That's all you get. Everything here, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot all happen in the 7th month, and we know those all happen in the spring, in the fall. The other holidays, they all happen in the springtime. And they are bookends of the agricultural season, right? One is the very beginning of the agricultural season, one is the end of the agricultural season. That is how Jewish holidays map. They map according to that exact scenario. And Anita is letting me know that this is why Jews were not meant to live in South Africa. Well, that's not what she said, but since different hemispheres, they're reversed. But I would say this is why Jews, well, first of all, yeah. And this is also why you don't live in Hawaii, because Hawaii has no seasons, right? But this is, the Torah is designed for the land of Israel, right? So this all applies to the land of Israel. Okay. So, but you see that we have these two halves, and you have spring and fall, and right here in the center, well, actually, I'll get to that in 1 second. All right. So I'm going to clear my chicken scratch. We're going to do 1 second. Hi, Shelley. I'm finishing the class. If I have another 8 minutes. Okay. All right. So, and I have 8 minutes to get us home. All right. Let's see if we can do this. All right. Now, there's something in Torah scholarship, which is it's in many kinds of scholarship, but it's called a chiastic structure. So chiastic structure is, right, it's A, B, C, D, B, A, right? It follows this sort of this crescendo up, down. And the center of the structure is always the important piece. In our structure, what's the center? The center was that the agricultural mitzvot should be for the poor. But what else is interesting is, I'm going to skip this. Okay. Here's what I think is very interesting. One of the words that you're going to see is something very interesting. This all applies to the first half of the calendar. The first half of the calendar is going to go like this. When you come to the land which God gave you, and you are going to reap your harvest, right? You see, I have selected the term for harvest. This root, kuf tzadi resh, right? Kuf tzadi resh. This means harvest, right? So when you come your harvest, you shall bring the omer. This is the word for omer. Reshit ketzirchem al kohen. The first of your harvesting has to go to the kohen. So we've got this repetitive piece about the harvest. The beginning has to be given to God, right? That's a sort of thank you to God, goes to the kohen, goes to the temple. So the start of the harvest is for God, but the end of the harvest, the end of that first section, the end of that right side, right, which went Shabbat, Pesach, and then the counting of the Omer and Shavuot, right? It says right? Again, this word gets repeated again. Katzir, katzir, katzir. That section is with the reference to giving it to the poor. Which is a beautiful idea, is that for a Jewish farmer, the beginning of your harvest you give to God. The end of the harvest, you make sure you worry about the poor. In the middle, you make your money, right? But there's that very interesting picture of how that gets structured together. The beginning is for God, the end is for the poor, right? You know, the Jewish farmer is a true spiritualist, right? He's taking care, he answers to God, he takes care of his fellow, right? And there's this beautiful parallel between the two of those. So I thought that was really interesting. But there's yet more, which is a little interesting. The other thing which is very interesting, and hold on. Okay. We'll close with this. The Atzeret concept. What's the Atzeret concept? Is I'm going to, if we look at the holidays, there are two holidays which sort of get set apart. Sukkot, if you look at the way in which if you look at the way in which the Torah sets them up, I don't have time to show you the whole narrative, but it sets up Sukkot in its own separate place, and also Shavuot gets set up in its own separate place. Each of them, seems to have a conclusion of a sort, right? You have to start a new count for Shavuot. When you come to Sukkot, it says even on Sukkot. And what is interesting about this is the first holidays are all holidays that are disconnected from the land of Israel. But the final holiday of each set is one which is only really observable in the land of Israel. Allow me to explain. Shabbat is sort of the one which transcends everything, right? It is whenever the seventh day is, wherever it is, there is no geographical limitation on Shabbat. Pesach is anchored in time, but not in any kind of geography. But what we saw with Shavuot is you start with, remember that picture of them slicing the wheat? There's a harvest of the wheat. That begins the seventh. That is what begins the movement towards Shavuot. You need to essentially, Shavuot in its truest form begins right after Pesach with the beginning to harvest the barley, right? And it ends with the two loaves. This is I guess I'm going to have to put this in blue, right? This is what we would call an Israeli holiday. These are stripes, not crossouts, okay? Right? So this is an Israeli holiday. And Sukkot is also is going to be an Israeli holiday. Oh, let me just get rid of okay. So I just want to, on this, let me, okay. I'm going to be able to give you translation with it. Oh no, so I want source with the translation. Okay. 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 So right here, sentence 25 is Yom Kippur. Okay? So this part is Yom Kippur. Oh, sorry. Okay. Okay. So we finished Yom Kippur. Here we go. This is the conclusion of Yom Kippur right here. And then it says, Vayedaber Hashem Moshe Emor. We say again, God, tell the children of Israel. And we tell them that there's going to be a Chag HaShavuot, and the argument of why Chag HaShavuot gets set off apart is because the Chag HaSukkot is going to, one of these days I'll learn how to work my computer. It's going to come as a separate thing because we're told be'ospechem et tefuat haaretz. When you come to harvest the tefuah of the aretz, when you come to harvest at the end. So the coda of every holiday season is something which is fully agricultural. And so I guess I'll close with this. These holidays come to us with the first holiday sort of existing in any geography. But the last one, which the rabbis will call Atzeret, the closing of the holiday, each one of them has a very deep agricultural tie. Each one is a sort of celebration of being in the land of Israel. So to me, it's a very interesting sort of structure to see in this whole thing. And the center, the crown jewel of this chiastic structure is, of course, the fact that you're giving something to the poor. Interestingly, by the way, and I'll have to close with this, the Rambam is going to say that if you celebrate your holidays without inviting the poor into your house, it is not really a celebration, it is not happiness, but rather the indulgence of your own stomach. With that,